ladies and gentlemen, my next guest is the best-selling author of 4 books on American presidents and a political analyst for NBC News. His new book is called American Reckoning. Please welcome John Alter. John, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Stephen.
You and I have talked pretty continually on camera and off for 20 years now.
We have.
Very informative to me about how politics works and what the stakes are of any given political cycle that we're going through. The new book here is it's about Donald Trump's hush money trial. There it is, called American Reckoning, and about your journey as a political journalist and as a presidential historian. For those who don't know you as well as I do, what got you involved in politics or covering politics? Your interest in it?
Yeah. So the story starts before I was born. My mother met Eleanor.
Is this David Copperfield? Go ahead.
My mother met Eleanor Roosevelt in 1948 when she was like the most famous woman in the world, and Eleanor took an interest in her, and my mother got intensely interested in politics.
This is in Chicago,
and history.
right?
No, this was when she was in college, but I grew up in Chicago.
Okay.
And they got us very interested in politics growing up and history. So, I played with Lincoln logs, not Legos, and I...
For the political reasons?
Yeah, basically.
Now, you write in the book that you lost your claim. You have lost your claim to be, as JFK once said, an idealist without illusions. What illusions did you find out in writing this book and in the period of time that you're writing it? What illusions did you find out you still had about American democracy?
Well, I had been raised as an idealist, and my parents were involved in the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King came to our home when I was 8 years old, and I got his autograph on lined, third grade paper. He was giving a little mini I Have a Dream speech in our living room, actually. So I grew up really imbued with the love of this country and its institutions. And I was a skeptical journalist, but I've never been a cynical journalist. And I did think of myself for 40 years at Newsweek and writing for other places, like JFK, as an idealist without illusions. And in the Trump era, I realized I had more illusions about this country than I realized, and that close to half of the country apparently doesn't take democracy as seriously as I do.
For 2 months, you're one of the few reporters with access to Trump's hush money trial, which I said is it's all detailed here in your book. Why did you want to be in that room so badly to cover that trial?
Because I needed to bear witness. Franklin Roosevelt during the Depression, he had people hang a decal in the window with a blue eagle, and it said, "We do our part." And so I was asking myself, what part can I play? And I reflected back on an interview I did with Richard Nixon in 1988, who I had hate-watched on TV for years. And, I said, how will history remember Ronald Reagan? It was the end of the Reagan administration. He said, well, you have to distinguish between history and the historians, because the historians are like you, they're liberal. If you're conservative, you go into business. If you're a liberal, you write history or journalism. And I felt seen by Nixon. Like, I felt, this guy's got my number. All that I bring to the party is bearing witness. And so when this trial was about to begin, I really did everything I could to get in there, mostly because it wasn't televised. So all of you couldn't see it. So unless you wanted to read the transcripts, which nobody does, I felt like I was going to be one of the only people who told you what it was actually like inside the trial of the 21st century so far.
What's the most memorable thing you remember from your trial?
Well, I mean, the most memorable thing was sitting a few feet away from the jury foreperson when he said, guilty, 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 34 times. And I've covered a lot of big stories. This was right up there. Remember, Donald Trump had not been held accountable since his father died like 30 years ago. Nobody had ever been able to tell him anything. And this was kind of provisional accountability because the sentencing is coming up and a lot depends on the election. But it was real accountability and it was real dramatic. And also, look, Stormy Daniels dissing Trump to his face for hours on end, that was fun. You know?
That's my idea of porn.
And then I would use my binoculars. I'd look at the jurors, which of course nobody outside the
You were
courtroom
allowed
could see.
to bring binoculars?
Yes, no cell phones, but binoculars, as long as we didn't look at the exhibits on computers. One time, a guard, I called him Redbeard, who was a lieutenant, one of the police officers, and they were all over the court. He saw me looking through binoculars. He thought I was looking at Trump's computer, which you're not allowed to do. And he, made me stop doing it.
Yep.
But I would look at the jurors all the time, and especially juror number 2, who the Trump people thought was going to give them a hung jury, because I don't know why they thought that. They were completely wrong, of course. But I would stare at him, juror number 2, through my binoculars, and he would stare back at me like, "What are you looking at?" I'm not an animal in the zoo, and I'm
People
like,
don't
hey,
like to be stared at. People don't like to be stared at.
Right? They don't.
We have to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more John Alter, everybody.